Hello there everyone, the Glitch64 here, and welcome to a new sort of series that I wanted to do, running down everything that you would need to know to do Duck Life speedruns and giving a more detailed sort of look at all the functions and different tactics that we do. So for this one I wanted to get probably the most complicated one out of the way, the right-click functions. These are the ones that cause the most confusion, even with people like myself who have been speedrunning this game for a long time. It can get pretty messy, so sit back and relax, and this video should hopefully explain all the right-click functions. In this one I'll be explaining what RCP and RCB mean for Duck Life. But first, what does RCP and RCB stand for? Well, they mean right-click play and right-click back respectively. One moves you forward in the game, one moves you backwards in the game. Simple as that. So right-click play is the name we give moving forward in a scene in all Duck Life games. In Flash games, you can skip sections of the game by simply forcing the game to jump ahead by telling it to go to the next scene. Some examples would be using it to skip ahead of training games, to get past races, and skipping results screens. There's a lot you can do playing around with right-click play, as telling a game to skip to the next scene can have some pretty weird consequences. Depending on when you use it, the game can have your progress saved, or if you use it to skip things, let's say another world in Duck Life 4, the game gets confused. Since you aren't supposed to be here yet, your duck's stats won't save over, keeping you at 0. Of course, you can trick it into increasing, or manipulate backflow with RCB, but we'll get to that later. So how do you trigger RCP? Well, despite it being in the name that we give to every Duck Life game, only the first two Duck Life games actually use the right click and play buttons. So in Duck Life 1 and 2 you can perform this by hitting your right mouse button and pressing the P key, here standing for play. You can also instead opt for right click and then pressing the F key. This of course means forward, and it's used to skip waiting for other ducks to finish races, as it doesn't skip a whole chunk of the game, but rather takes you to the very next screen, and I'll explain how that works soon. In Duck Life 3 and 4, RCP is done by holding Alt-C and then P or F. This is because the game no longer lets you access these options from the right-click menu, but only from the top menu in a drop-down box. However, with Alt-C, C being for the control tab, we can access this more easily without moving the mouse over every single time. Keyboard shortcuts save a lot of time. So now the meat of it all. What can you do with this function in a Duck Life speedrun? Well, there is one massive use we have for this, but there are a couple of smaller ones too, and I'll go over them now. The biggest use of RCP is to skip the waiting times after races. See, after your duck wins a race, you'll have to either wait for all the ducks to cross the line, or until a countdown is done, disqualifying them. Both pretty big time wasters, but we have a way to skip that. So as soon as you cross the finish line, the game saves what place you just ranked. So by using right click F, forward, we can skip straight to the results screen. Now if you do this before crossing the line, the game doesn't know what to do, so you'll get a results screen, but the game won't actually count that as a win. You won't pass the race, and more importantly, for 100%, you won't get that sweet reward money. But if you do cross the line before skipping, the game has your position saved. It also has all the other ducks predetermined as to what place they'll come. So the second you've hit that line, the game knows exactly what position you're in, and what position everyone else is in. So if you skip that waiting sequence, the game will count your win, and store that info, giving you that race clear and your prize money. But say you don't want to do all the races. Say you have the levels and you're ready to go. Well, you can enter the first race and just RCP through all the races until you hit the previously locked championship race, where you can verse the champ and voila, game done. Now a lot of people have said, well, why don't you RCP past the champion straight to the win screen? Well, in theory you could, but A, does a 7-second speedrun sound like any fun to you? And B, remember when I said before that if no one passes the finish line, the game gets really confused? Well, the same goes for the champ fight. If you do skip past it, you and the champ will flicker between first and second on every frame, and you'll enter this glitched you win screen. But this win doesn't count, the game doesn't recognize you won, so no crown for you. Either the champion has to cross the line, in which case you've lost, or you have to cross the line, in which case you've already got the levels to beat him. And even at max skills, RCF at the champ race saves like maybe 30 frames, and there's a pretty good chance that instead of saving those frames, you'll whiz right past the win screen and go right back to the menu. So, long story short, there's no good way to beat the champ without the proper levels. But, who said you had to get those levels legitimately? Well, that's where our even more broken friend, RCB, comes in. RCB stands for right click back, essentially forcing the game to go back a scene. Think of it as a big rewind button, but reversing time can help us exploit a lot more tricks. Very quickly, I'll explain RCB can be used by simply hitting right click and the B key in Duck Life 1 and 2, and the Alt C and B method in 3 and 4. So let's get into how you can utterly destroy this game with this feature. In Duck Life 1, the main use of this function is to gain all our levels in swimming without doing a single second of training. The game remembers your score until you do another round of training, and the score resets and counts again. But if you quit training after you're done, the game holds onto this value. So by going to the scene right before a training game, in this case the race select screen, you can go to the very end of swimming, and the game then reads that score that it saved. Now usually this number would be 0, but since we have stored it by doing some running training, the game sees that score and then adds it to our swimming. Rinse and repeat, and before you know it, you have 150 levels without flapping a single fin. RCB has another cool feature, a feature I deemed the second chance button. Say you're doing some running training and you accidentally hit a rock. Well, I guess we have to start the training again, right? Well, no. Instead, we can just RCB and get back into the game and start off with the score that we just died from, and we can continue our journey. But we can go further. We can combine this with RCF. See, let's say you die at 20,000. You'll get the level for those points, and then you can right click back to get to that 20,000 point limit again. Then you can hit RCF and skip back to the results screen, but the game then checks your values, sees that you've got 20,000 again, and gives you those levels again. So, if you just keep hitting RCB and RCF back and forth enough, you'll get the levels from that one score over and over again. The score values in Duck Life 1 and 2 are very manipulable. Just by being able to store them, we can take minutes off the game time. Of course, most categories will ban RCB just because of how insanely broken it is. Also, a quick aside before we move into using it in Duck Life 4. In Duck Life 2, we'll use this trick to gain levels in climbing instead of swimming. As in 2, climbing is the last training game, scene order wise, not swim. So that's where the game ends up putting us. Duck Life 4 has a lot of minigames, but we can do our old RCB back into the game trick to get infinite levels from your one score in a few of the training sessions. These are running 1, swim 3, flying 1, climbing 1, and jumping 3. However, in Duck Life 4, the game doesn't allow you to right click forward back into the results screen to count. You'll actually need to die again yourself. RCB can also be used to get into the champ before the game even begins. Click your quality settings, and when it loads into the blank screen, giving you the story, just RCB until you're sent to the screen that asks if you want to race again after failing the champion race and falling into lava. Then if you click the race again, the game just puts you back into the champion race. And the champion race doesn't use your levels, the duck runs at a constant speed no matter what, so this time, you don't even need the levels. And lastly, Duck Life 3 can also use right click back to rewind so far that you end up at the very end. You can rewind all the way to the Domo Shootout Arcade, and then upon exiting, the game wrongly warps you to the final room, since it assumes that the only way you got into Arcade was by beating the game. RCB is banned in all Duck Life 3 categories except for Domo Run, because basically you just have to rewind until you get to the Domo Shootout game. Why? Well, sometimes it's just fun to take out our frustrations on some domos. So, that was a detailed rundown on the right-click play, forward, and back functions. I hope this video has helped you get an idea on how these work, and if you have any questions left, feel free to ask us in the Duck Life Speedrun Discord, there's a link below. And before I go, huge shout outs to Chegjon for helping me get all the information on right click back and making sure I didn't leave anything out. You can check out his channel in the link below and you can get a good idea on how these are used in practice. Anyways, have a wonderful day and I hope to see you next time. Peace.